Welcome to Creative Piecemeal Podcast, a podcast for creatives. I'm your host, Tammy Takeishi. Join me for compelling conversations with artists, actors, authors, musicians, and other creatives about the impact of the creative and fine arts in their lives and our ever-changing world. Thank you for listening. Hello and welcome to Creative Piecemeal Podcast. Today I'm joined by one of my very best friends, Leah Oladitan. She is a licensed dietitian and she is able to practice not only in the United States but also in the United Kingdom. And she has a variety of experience across many healthcare settings. And I'm really excited to have her on the show for one of our January episodes to discuss health, nutrition, and its impact on the mental health as well. So welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
This is really cool because we've been best friends since junior high, but this is the first time we've had a chance to really talk about what you do. So I would love to know what led you to this career.
Well, that is a great question. It is not one that was a straight path. When I knew I wanted to go to college, but there was nothing really that stuck out to me as like, oh, very passionate, something I was very passionate that I knew for sure I wanted to do. As colleges usually have, they have a place for lost people to find their way and to kind of look at your aptitudes and see what you're good at. And so I took some of those and they, pinpointed my strengths or the things that I really was interested in, which were science. And I have an aptitude for math, although I don't necessarily enjoy it. I like to work with people. And so one of their tests took me to the healthcare realm and the role of working in nutrition and health, specifically dietetics, was one of the things that came up. And for people who don't know, dietetics is the science of managing food and nutrition to promote health. So it's a very fancy term, but that's what it means. So that was something I never heard of before. And I was really intrigued by that. And I would happen to go to a school it's a really good school for that degree field and had a lot of science courses and nutrition and food. It's a great place to go get fresh made food as well. They have a lot of science courses where you make food. So it was a great place for me to actually be at and to find this career field. And I've really enjoyed it.
That's wonderful. What is one thing that you're like a niche that you're really passionate about within your field?
I would say I have a huge passion for research. Specifically, there's a lot of unanswered questions. The science of food and how it affects health is relatively new in the realm of like doing scientific experiments and really understanding all of the facets of it. So I really enjoy that research piece, like adding to the knowledge base. And not only that, but also taking that knowledge and then helping people implement it in their lives. There's a lot of research that's done that doesn't necessarily always, you don't know how it's going to relate to your everyday life. And it's really hard to navigate that. There's so much misinformation out there. And research is really just hard to understand because it's, you're taking a little pinpoint of one specific thing and trying to apply it to the world of all these different variety of actual situations. So that's one thing I really, really enjoy.
I guess that kind of explains why some years it's like milk and eggs are great. Milk and eggs are bad. Milk and eggs are great. It's like, oh my goodness, just eat what your body likes, right?
That's right. And that's what makes it really difficult. And I get a question a lot on like, is this food good for me? Is this food not good for me? And that's a great question, but it's a really challenging one to answer without asking you many other questions before I can answer it, because it really depends. And sometimes you don't know. And that's just the reality of it.
Right. Because somebody may have food allergies or texture preferences, or of course, everyone's taste and flavor preferences as well come into that.
Oh, absolutely. And then what you eat, it's not a single event that happens one time. You eat and you take, nourishment every day, all day, and it varies from day to day. So that's an important element as well.
I'm sure you get asked a lot, are there any superfoods that you eat? But again, that would almost be a moot point because it really depends on each individual body and what they need for their lifestyle and their medical needs.
Absolutely. And the best advice I can give people is to, eat a good variety of different things that's general information that is generally good for people, and just continue to try to be open to try new food.
I must admit, I was at the doctor's a few weeks ago and I said, is there such thing as me eating too much avocado? Because I've been on an avocado toast kick. And she's like, no, you're good. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to turn into an avocado tomorrow. Okay, great.
No, but you bring up a good point. There's definitely too much of a good thing, right?
Mhm.
Like my favorite term that probably nobody likes to hear is everything in moderation. So you can fit a lot of things in if you're careful about how much of it you eat. So that was a great question that you asked your doctor.
And I'm also grateful that I don't have to like decrease my avocado toast intake.
Yes. Yeah. But if you were, one of the things that dietitians are able to help do is like, well, how much and how do you do that? And is there something you can do to modify it a little bit so you still get that desired food, but maybe
Mhm.
not in the same, in an amount that's okay for you?
What is a book, and it doesn't even have to be nutrition related, that you've read recently that challenged you?
I'm going to have to admit, I'm not one that spends a lot of time reading books. Majority of the time I spend is reading research. Since I enjoy research, looking at scientific literature. And I've actually been reading up a little bit on, well, several different things. The one that comes to mind at the moment is autism and nutrition and how those two interact. I probably wouldn't go into specific of what it said because I don't want to give people the wrong information, but that's been what I've been reading about just to learn, because I have a neighbor that has an autistic child and we've had some discussions about that and just some of their food preferences. And then I'm having a discussion with somebody else here in a couple of weeks on that. So that's been what I've been reading up about recently.
Yeah, definitely important to stay on top of the research in the fields that both you and I are in, actually.
Yeah, it's crazy how things can move at lightning speed constantly.
Definitely. As the new year starts, I'm sure a lot of people sort of start to think about their goals and their mental health goals as well as their food goals. Obviously, I'm not saying advise the general public, but what are some tried and true things that you think about when creating goals or even just thinking about a reset?
As I mentioned, as we talked about a little bit earlier, eating and nutrition is a lifelong journey. It's not something that is going to change overnight. And, if you're thinking about goals, being realistic with yourself on where you are in your life, what's going on in your world right now. Sometimes that means you can do a lot of things. You can meal prep every day. And other times it means that, you can maybe make one change and that's all that you can do. And so I think really what's important is people, be realistic with themselves and give themselves the space to be like, this is really where I'm at. And this is what I feel like I can actually accomplish. Because when you're able to accomplish it, you get a sense of reward, a rewarded feeling. Feels good to do something to meet your goals, where it's really discouraging when you set a really high bar and then you don't make it and you just feel really discouraged, like you didn't really make any changes.
That is really excellent. And it brings up such a great point across all the guests that I've talked to is people giving themselves grace and sometimes just going in baby steps to accomplish whatever it is that they're hoping to accomplish.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a very fast pace, at least in my world. It's very fast paced. There's things going all the time. And so it's okay to slow down and, not try and go at that lightning speed that fast as maybe you feel like everybody else is, and comparing yourself to others too. You want to look at your own individual progress, not necessarily a different person somewhere that you may be seeing.
I know your field is very scientific, but I'm sure there's so many options to get creative in your field, whether it's meal planning or recipe creation or recipe tweaking or, making menus or something. Like, would you care to share a little bit about what you love to do on the creative aspect in your job?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just say this up front. My husband does not enjoy this, but I really like to experiment in my cooking. I don't mind throwing a new thing in here or trying something, that we've never had before. Or I might, somebody might tell me about something and I might like, oh, let's try and add this ingredient in, or let me try and cook this vegetable in a different way that I've never made before, add this sauce to it. There's some successes and there's definitely some failures. That's the great thing about food is there's a lot of different, it is a very creative field. And there's a lot of people with a lot of creativity that go into it, creating education that or materials that other people can use, like cooking. There's so many websites that people use different, to have different techniques to teach each other, which I think it's just awesome that we're able to learn from each other. And, the internet and the world has so many different ways to gather information that we can really take that and learn from our neighbor. I specifically really enjoy it from the cultural aspect, or the, foods from different walks of life, people from different ways, that grew up different ways or lived in different places, learned to create different meals. I really think that's pretty amazing.
Is there a food that is really meaningful to you, or a recipe that you really enjoy, or anything like that, that it doesn't have to be nutritious, it's just something that's meaningful to you that you really like?
Yeah, so one of my favorite things to eat, I will admit, I definitely love chocolate. It's one of my favorites, but I like to make it, because I am a dietitian, I want to make sure that I sometimes get it in a healthier way too. So I like to make oatmeal with cocoa powder and peanut butter, and I mix that all up and usually add a fruit of some kind, either dried fruit or like a banana. And so that's a meal that I'll have. I would eat that every day for breakfast, or even dinner sometimes when I have a busy day. So that's one of my favorites, one of my go-tos.
That sounds really tasty. I've actually never tried that before.
Yeah, it's pretty versatile. Like you could, different, it doesn't have to be peanut butter. It could be any nut butter that you could add to it. There's my dietitian side coming out. I'm thinking of all the different ways you can make it.
Yeah, of course. Of course. Got to be mindful of the different varieties that and ways you can spice things up because of people's allergies and whatnot.
Yeah.
Speaking of food, you live in the Kansas City area. What are some top 3 places you could recommend a tourist visiting your part of the world?
Probably the best one I would say is Joe's Barbecue, formerly known as Oklahoma Joe's. They have a couple of locations. For the experience, I would definitely recommend the original location. It's just got a really cool vibe in a former gas station. That would be probably top of the line there. Man, I'm trying to think if I can any other ones that come to mind.
I know it's
Well,
hard.
there's one. It is. Okay, so I have another one that's just happens to be close to where I work. It's in the city of Liberty, so it's not in Kansas City, but it's near the airport. It's on the northern side of town, and it has a restaurant called Seva, Seva, and they are an Indian restaurant, and I really enjoy their buffet. I definitely enjoy Indian buffet, and they have a really good one.
Now I'm getting hungry. Yeah.
Welcome to my life.
Right?
Talking about food all the time. Yep.
Yeah. We actually have a really great Indian buffet, several of them in the Houston area, but one that I love going to is in the downtown area of Houston near the Galleria, which I don't get down there very much because it's a little bit of a drive nowadays, but oh, so good. So good.
Mhm.
So for anyone coming to the Houston area, India's on Richmond Avenue. There you go.
There you go. I will try that out next time I'm in Houston.
Yeah. Maybe not during the summer because it gets really hot here during the summer.
Oh, noted.
What is one of the biggest challenges that you face in your position on a regular basis?
I think the biggest challenge is there are not always answers to the questions that you want. And again, this brings us back to research, and it's probably why I'm so fascinated and interested in it. People want to know, or really, they want to know what they can do, or they have specific questions about like the food, like I mentioned before, like, is this good for me? Or how much of this should I eat?
Mm-hmm.
And, unfortunately, don't always have the answers. So that would be the biggest challenge that I face. I think another one, in general, is we're talking about behavior change, and changing any behavior is really, really, it's difficult. It takes a lot of learning about yourself and evaluating kind of what's important to you. And so that's a challenge as well.
Would you say that your field incorporates a bit of cognitive behavioral therapy, but from a food standpoint?
Oh, absolutely. And it depends a little bit on which aspect of it you go into, right? So medical nutrition therapy, where you have a diagnosis and you have, there's more of a prescription of like, we know more about what you can and can't do, or what you need to do. Diabetes would be one, for example, that's really, more scientific information on. That's a little bit, there's still an element of it in there, but it's a little bit more concrete. Definitely in the realm of, trying to change behaviors. You have difficulty with disordered eating, or you're trying to deal with coping with stress and eating, or your weight, you want to change your weight in some way, that can be a little bit more of the cognitive behavioral therapy realm, for sure.
Would you mind telling me a little bit more about mindfulness and mindful eating? That is not something, I mean, obviously I've heard of mindfulness, but I'm not familiar with mindful eating.
Yeah, I could definitely tell you a little bit more about that. Mindfulness, it's a way to reduce stress. There was a professor of emeritus of medicine, John Kabat-Zinn is his name, that kind of came up with that. There are elements of mindfulness in Buddhist teachings, but he took it into the cognitive therapy realm, and it's now something that's used as therapy for depression and anxiety. So there is a lot of interest in mindful eating as like a subgroup of that, incorporating the practices of mindfulness, but relating them towards food and how we approach eating. There's 3 components of mindfulness: present moment awareness, so just really being present in this moment, what's happening right now, being engaged in the experiences you're having, the thoughts you're having, and the feelings or emotions. So like with food, that's just being very mindful of like the taste, the texture, the smell, the temperature of the food, what it looks like. And then attention to your feelings. Are you hungry? Are you full? Is the food hot? Is it cold? All of those things. And just being mindful of the cues that you take from that food and kind of how it impacts you. The second element of it is acceptance. So just being curious about how you respond to food, not necessarily being judgmental on yourself towards that experience or what you're thinking or feeling, just being aware of it and not trying to control it. The third part of that is called decentering, which is really the concept of stepping outside of kind of your own experience and looking at it from a different perspective. So you're viewing your own emotions as kind of just a moment in time, that they're really separate from you and not necessarily a true reflection of the reality of what's going on. So you can just take a step back outside of yourself. And that's helpful if, when you're looking at cravings and food related thoughts in the moment, to help you from a mental standpoint. And actually, if you're up for it, Tammy, I have an exercise we can do if you have some food handy.
I do. I happen to have miniature Doritos.
Oh, excellent. Okay. So, so if anybody that's following along wants to do this exercise at home, it's the purpose of the exercise is to just get you introduced to the concept of mindful eating and mindfulness and from the food perspective. So what you need is you just need a food item. It doesn't matter. You can like it, you can don't like it. It doesn't really matter. And so once you have that, if you're going to do the exercise, I'd pause it now. Don't go ahead and listen. It's best if it's done the first time. Is kind of you don't know what's going to happen. So you need to kind of get the food and then listen to it as you go. Okay. So Tammy, do you have your food item ready?
I do. I am ready.
Okay. So first of all, before you start the exercise, you got to make sure you kind of have your environment set up the right way. So are you seated?
Yes.
At somewhere? Okay. And then you want to have your legs uncrossed. There's no distractions in the room around you, like, any devices or pets or anything that's going to distract you from your focus. Okay. And then first, just want you to take a deep breath. Breathe in and breathe out. And I just want you to feel yourself sitting in the chair. You can do this with your eyes open or closed, whatever is most comfortable to you. Now, I want you to go ahead and get that chip or that food item, whatever it may be, and just place it in your hand. You don't have to look at it, just place it in your hand. Okay, now we're going to go on a little imaginary journey here, and we're going to imagine that you have just come to Earth from a very distant planet. And at that planet, there is no such food that you have in your hand there. So this is your first experience ever with it. Now with this food in your hand, you're going to begin to explore it with all your senses. So we're going to go through those one by one. First, I want you to focus on the food as if you've never seen anything like it before. So go ahead and look at it. Focus on seeing it. You can scan it. I want you to explore every part of it as if you've never seen anything like it before. Turn it around with your fingers. Notice what color it is. Notice the shape. Any lines or folds. Where the reflection on the surface is light or becomes dark. Do you see anything else? Next, you're going to explore the texture. So you're just going to feel the item. You're going to feel, is it soft? Is it hard? Is it more coarse or more smooth? What other textures do you feel? While you're doing this, if there are any thoughts that come up in your mind, like, why am I doing this weird exercise? Or how will this ever help me? Or I really don't like what I'm holding in my hand. It's okay. That's totally fine. You just want to acknowledge that you have these thoughts and just let them be. And then bring yourself back to an awareness of the object. Now let's take the object beneath your nose and carefully notice the smell of it. Is it strong? Is it light? Is it sweet? Now bring the object to one ear and move it around to see if you can hear anything. If you roll it around in your fingers or you squeeze it, do you notice anything? Now gently place the object in your mouth. Place it on your tongue, but do not bite. Simply explore the sensation of the object in your mouth. Can you tell that your mouth is watering? When you're ready, with intention, bite down on the object. What do you notice? Maybe you're noticing how it automatically glows to one side of your mouth versus the other, or that your saliva in your mouth has changed the consistency of the object. When you're ready, go ahead and swallow, and being conscious to notice the intention that you have to take to swallow. Then see if you can notice the sensation of swallowing it, the sensation of it moving down your throat into your esophagus on its way to your stomach. Now it's time to congratulate yourself for taking the first step in experiencing mindful eating.
Yay!
Yay! So Tammy, how was that experience for you?
I actually thought it was really neat, but I kind of wish I would have chosen a different food object because, as we all know, when eating certain types of chips with like a powdery coating, the coating gets on one's fingers. And I was like, it was like driving me bonkers. I'm like, my hands are getting cheesy.
Yeah, so that's a great awareness that your mind and your thoughts went straight to the cheesy fingers and that sensation.
Yeah. It was almost distracting, but not quite
Yeah.
because, you directed me through it.
So it's called the raisin experiment. If you want to look it up, it has a name. It's often done with a raisin, but it doesn't have to be a raisin. It can be any food. So that is a technique in mindful eating. It's one that a lot of people find really odd at first or really difficult to slow down and keep the focus on the exercise. Like you mentioned, it is really challenging and that's absolutely normal. It gets easier over time with practice, like many things, and it just brings your attention back to your experience. And so repeating that multiple times, and that could be something where somebody listens to this over and over again to really go through the exercise, or they get to a point where they're ready to do it on their own. And they can start doing it with more than just a food item. They could do it with a meal throughout the day. So that's a way to build on the experience of mindfulness around eating. I do have a list of 10 questions people can ask themselves to see how they're doing with mindful eating, if that's something they're interested in. And I can give that to you so you can put that out there on your pages.
Happy to do so. And that was so fun. I'm glad that you shared that because you've known me for a long time. I wouldn't exactly say I'm a picky eater, but I'm a particular eater. So it's hard for me to try new foods.
Yeah, it is. It's definitely a challenge for a lot of people. I think that experiment is great for I shouldn't say experiment. It's really an experience. It's something that's great for people who maybe aren't, have struggled with trying new things or different textures, different tastes. People who have emotional responses to eating, that's certainly something they could try. Or if they find themselves being mindless in their eating, right? Like if you tend to find, like at the movie theaters, we all have done this where we get a bucket of popcorn and we get to the bottom, we don't even realize what happened. We're like, where did it all go? So this is a way to bring us back to just being more aware of the foods, if those are things that you want to work on and improve.
Related to this, I just had a conversation with a good friend last night about how in Japanese culture, they have so many different flavors of Kit Kats. And I said, well, I love Kit Kats, but I'm too afraid to try any of the flavors other than like original Kit Kat because I don't want to spend my money on said flavor and then not like it. So I just avoid it altogether.
Yeah, that's completely fair. You need to find someone that you can that will give you half of a Kit Kat or a Kit Kat bar. So you can go through this and you could just smell it. And if you don't want it, then you can give it back.
There you go. Yeah.
That'd probably have to be a close friend though. Yeah.
Like, can I pass your candy under my nose and give it back? Are you good with that?
Right.
Oh, goodness. But yeah, I mean, and that's about candy. I mean, can you imagine like me going to a restaurant? Like,
Mhm. Yeah, people often forget all of the different senses and muscles and learning that takes place to be an eater. I've worked with a lot of children that, have struggled with that, and there's a lot of steps. And anyone working on anything related to that, progress is progress. Whether it's 1%, it's still progress. So as long as you're open to it.
Very true. Very true. I'll keep you posted on how the Kit Kat thing goes.
Yeah, and next time I see you, I'd be happy to buy you a different flavor of Kit Kat.
Excellent. So we're going to get to know a little bit of the person behind the science. And if I were to raid your CD collection from 2001, what is something I would find?
Okay, I have to think about my age at that time. You know what age that is, but I'm not going to say it.
Yes. We were mere babes.
We were. I am going to say, so probably Britney Spears, to be honest with you.
I kind of had a feeling you were going to say that.
Did you really? Yeah, that's the one that comes to mind. I'm not sure if Destiny's Child was a thing at that point, but that I could see that as well. You remember those collections of like now hits for each year? Yes, that would be me listening to that CD.
They had some really great songs on those and, good compilations. I think they still make them.
Do they? Oh, I wonder what number they're at now.
Probably
I was there
like
for the
100 or
OG, the
something,
first
right?
one. Yeah.
I know. Yeah, that CD and that cover are like forever emblazoned into my memory. I have another food question. What is something you would bring to a potluck or a picnic?
Oh, my go-to for a potluck or picnic is something that's pretty simple generally, but has a lot of variety to it. So I like to usually it's a pre-made salsa. If I have a lot of time, I'll make it myself, but it's a salsa and I add black beans and corn generally to it to make it like a little bit heartier salsa. So that's one of my go-tos. I really love all things nachos and tacos and tortillas and all that. So that's my go-to.
That sounds wonderful. If you could have dinner with any creative person, living or dead, who would it be and what would you have for the meal?
It would actually be like Cleopatra in Egypt, ancient Egypt, like the last Egyptian queen. She was a very cultured person from all that I have read about her, spoke several languages. She was in a time where she dealt with the Romans and the Egyptian cultures. And I would be really fascinated to eat dinner with her. I probably want to eat something vegetarian because I'm not sure what kind of meat they may be serving in that. And I'm not that experimental. But what vegetables they would have and what other foods they would probably eat for a normal meal. I would be interested to have that.
That's interesting. Yeah, so you would essentially want to try the food of her time and her culture.
I would.
I bet it was really tasty.
I bet so. They were in between Asia and Rome and like the spice. I don't know if that's when the spice trade. I don't know. It's just really fascinating to me. And her as a person, I find very fascinating as well.
It's a very interesting time in history, for sure. Mm-hmm. Excellent. Well, before we get to our last question, is there anything else that you would like to share with our listeners?
So as a dietitian, I have something that I'm doing a little bit more of now is menu analysis or meal analysis outside of my day job. Something that I really enjoy doing. And I've been doing it for a while on the side for a certain cafe. But really what I mean by that is, if somebody has a business or an organization has menus or meals and recipes they want analyzed for nutritional content to meet requirements, not schools, because that is its own separate entity that has specific requirements. It can't do schools, but other outside of a school. That's something I'm definitely available to help with. One particular area that I really have an interest in is the Meals on Wheels or groups that work on feeding older Americans There's some nutrition requirements for the Older Americans Act that they have to serve meals that meet specific nutritional requirements. And so that's a service that I'm able to provide. Some states have requirements that a dietitian has to provide that. So I've experience in doing that. Also for individuals that maybe are interested in that, that's something I definitely enjoy doing.
Excellent. And if someone reached out to you and they don't live in the Midwest area, are you able to still help them from far away?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, so we can do a lot of it by phone or email, so that's not a barrier. Depending on what they're looking for, there are some requirements in some states. Every state has their own rules around what you can do. Like medical nutrition therapy isn't something I'd be able to do, but analyzing menus or wanting to look at like, hey, there's a couple days I just want to see what am I getting enough vitamin D, or do I need more protein? Like I can do those things based on your size and your weight and your age and that kind of thing.
Excellent. Excellent. And we'll be sure to put links in the show notes for where people can find Leah and her services. Final question, a little bit of a departure from what we were talking about, but definitely a hallmark question. And it is, in your own words, what does living a creative life mean to you?
So I listen to your podcast, and so unfortunately I have to think of something that hasn't already been said. So but being creative is, I think, every day is a journey and it's unique to you. And so there's opportunities throughout the day to be creative in the small moments in your day. And I relate this to food, meaning like when you cook, creativity, every meal is a little bit different. And so that's you being creative. There's opportunities, and creativity to me brings some joy, being able to be creative and express yourself in different ways.
I love that. And to sort of piggyback on that, I love that, creating and bringing joy to eating can be very much a part of someone's healing journey, depending on what they're going through in their relationship with food.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd wish and hope for everybody to get to a place where food can be healing and a healthy activity that they engage in.
Excellent. Well, Leah, thank you so much for being on the show. Listeners, please check the show notes again to connect with Leah if you are interested in learning more about what she does and utilizing her services. And as always, thanks for listening. Thanks for listening to the podcast. Like the show? Have a question? Stop by the Facebook and Instagram pages. Links are in the show notes, or search for Creative Piecemeal Podcast on social media and click follow for all the latest.